They looked around, and then a brick seemed to emerge from nowhere, and they smashed their way right in. Drone Girl hit the emergency button on her phone. It worked whether she had a cell phone plan or not. There was some weird message it played back about emergency services being reprioritized. She hit the disconnect and stared into the store with her phone in her hand, realizing her mouth was partially open. She shut it, brain having mostly worked out the situation. Something bad happened in the city. Law enforcement is taxed. Those punks were looting. And nobody was stopping them. Drone Girl scratched her head as she pondered more. How many had she counted? 3 or 5? They were across the parking lot. If she could only be stealthy. The thought drifted off. Drone Girl started her rig warming up and then grabbed her trucker buddy, locked the door behind her electronically, then went into the store. If this was it, Drone Girl wanted to make sure she got something to work with. The punks were raiding the alcohol area, and they had a shopping cart apiece loaded to the top. Liquor had been legalized in grocery stores years ago. Put a ludicrous amount of good workers out of business. It was subsidized work, but regardless, that doesn't make it right to wholesale destroy a system when it had been working for so long. In the long run, all it did was put a ton of people out of business, and liquor theft went through the roof. These kids would have a hell of a time getting into a liquor store, but it took 2 seconds to get to a grocery store. Drone Girl snuck into the other side of the store with the quietest shopping cart she could find. She grabbed every single bag of coffee beans she possibly could. Drone Girl got about halfway out when the alcohol thief saw her. Hey, maybe she wants to be at our party. Get her. They abandoned their shopping carts and came at her at full speed. She grabbed a 3-gallon jar of pickles and rolled it at them. One jumped over, but the next didn't see it. His foot smashed through as he went down in an explosion of vinegar and broken glass. The other 4 didn't notice. They did not go to school of fighting one at a time, but Drone Girl was ready for this. She had covered riots and civil unrest before to get footage, and they had tried to steal her drones and cameras from her several times. She noticed these kids looked familiar, and they were all clad in black. She reminded herself they only stood one thing: force. Drone Girl stepped to one end of their lines and swung her trucker buddy as hard as she could at his exposed face. The punk never saw it coming and went down hard with important face pieces flying everywhere. 2 down. A 3rd twisted to miss the back end of the swing and fell on the 4th. Drone Girl knew she might be able to run now, but might not be able to get her vehicle back open in time. She went for the 5th's head, missing but hitting his shoulder. His arm immobilized, he looked for something to throw at her with his good arm to try to wear her down. She bolted away, pushing her cart out the propped open door as fast as it would go. Drone Girl wanted as much distance between them as they tried to recover. She wasn't about ready to abandon her loot yet. They could surround her and eventually one would get her, but if she could get to the truck, it would at least be to her back. She'd really only be fighting 2 unless the 3rd had a long weapon for his other hand. They could keep throwing stuff at her too, but she didn't see much around but small gravel. Could be bad in her eyes, but not much worse. Drone Girl got about halfway to the truck with her bags of coffee beans when they caught up to her. She tried to listen to the footsteps so she could swing, but it was caught in midair before connecting. But her swing was caught in midair before connecting to anything helpful to her intent. The interception was made by apparently the fastest one. His 2 friends hadn't quite caught up yet. She pulled him close, using her strength and momentum against him, and swept his feet out from under him as he flung towards her with a surprised look on his face. Drone Girl let the truck buddy smack the punk on the way down until she hit concrete, and then brought it up down on his head in the same motion. Repeated. She wound up to swing at the next 2, but they were too close and piled on her. She landed hard, the wind knocked out of her. They weren't punching and kicking her that hard, but every 3rd or 4th attack landed on a sensitive area as she curled up to protect her vitals. One of the attackers only had one good arm, but it didn't take him long to wrestle her trucker buddy away from her. After seconds that felt like minutes of pummeling, she saw the trucker buddy come up and then stop. She felt something rumbling on otherwise quiet ground. At around the same time as they heard it, a pickup truck. Was she saved? The punks started running away, but there was no time for them. The group of kids from the pickup jumped off as the truck pulled alongside and were on the prior attackers like a swarm. Drone Girl struggled to get on all fours. She recovered her trucker buddy that the attacker had dropped and used it to prop herself up as she gasped for air. Drone Girl looked around and started hobbling in pain the rest of the way to her truck, almost forgetting her bounty. She barely caught up with her shopping cart that had been teetering off on its own direction via momentum and gravity, then steered it back towards her truck. "By the way, there are more inside," she teared up as she tried to yell to them with the rest of the breath she had. One of them turned around mid-beating and gave her an okay sign. The small, familiar gesture made her smile. The clean-cut boys looked familiar, but she wasn't gonna wait around. Looking like a trucker, a blue-collared worker worked in her favor. She couldn't be easily misconstrued as a vandal. Drone Girl believed in minimal government, but definitely some form of functioning government. Otherwise, who would everyone? Otherwise, who would everyone have to worry about foreign policy for them? Drone Girl loaded up as she thought about how fortunately she was to survive the relatively unscathed, and then she drove off. The world had gone mad overnight. She fought back, sobbing as she drove off. She didn't know where to, but she had to get somewhere away from this. Chapter 11. Where is safe? The road. Day after collapse, late morning. Drone Girl drove on. She needed a safe place to stop and think. The city was a definite no-no. The truck stops were all a no-no. As she drove, she consulted her map, and it showed a way around the next huge city and straight to the coast. If anywhere was going to be safe, it was going to be as far away from these big cities as possible. She could have gone over the mountains to eastern Washington, but she grew up here and refused to leave. Thinking back to election maps, she remembered the coast always voted with the eastern portion of the state, so likely majority like-minded individuals. Taking the back roads was an extremely slow and arduous process that took hours, where the main route would have taken roughly 30 minutes. These other routes were already no doubt blocked on either side of the city, with the cities themselves having who knows what going on. Work from landslides was half complete, and Drone Girl had to drive on the wrong side of the road in some places to keep heading west. The further out she got, the more regular she started seeing people driving again. Drone Girl looked at them all and saluted as they passed. Nearly all of them saluted back. She found a nearby local grocery store and pulled up. Armed men with hunting rifles were walking around like they were hunting a Bigfoot or something. Drone Girl parked in the way back so she wouldn't be blocking anything, powered her giant vehicle down, and left her trucker buddy in the truck and hopped out. She felt eyes on her for a second, and then to her rig, and then back to scanning the area. Two of the guys started talking. Drone Girl boldly walked right up to them with confidence, honesty, and humility in her eyes. They looked at her with judgment and then with sorrow. One of them cummed something in on a radio. Drone Girl tried to talk with a little bit of an accent so she didn't sound so city. "Hey, y'all want to inspect my truck or anything? I come in peace." She teared up a little bit, while the emotion kept trying to resurface. They both took a step back, like they didn't want to have to get within physical distance of her. There was some mumbling on their radios that she couldn't make sense of. Moments later, a gal came out and told her to come inside. "Don't mind them," she said, half snarky. "They're just playing army. Think some kind of revolt is going on. You from the city?" "No, ma'am. I mean, I drive there sometimes, but I'm not from there, no." The gal looked like she was judging the authenticity of the response. "Let's get you cleaned up. Looks like you gone through hell, if you don't mind me saying." "Yeah, there were these 5 guys. They look a lot worse, though, I guarantee you." Drone Girl's eyes twinkled at the gal when she said that. "I bet they did, girl. I bet they did. Let's take a look at you, make sure nothing's broken." The gal brought her to a back room with blinds. It seemed like they had taken over this place and made it some kind of outpost in a matter of hours. "Do they plan for this stuff, or something? Drone girl wondered in her head. We heard bad stuff on the radio. All the electricity's down. Town's gone hell in a handbasket. Law says we can start taking care of the businesses while they do whatever craziness they're thinking in the town. There's no law, no 911 in the outlying city, Drone Girl responded. No info's coming out of the big cities right now. The gal nodded as she dabbed cotton with alcohol on some of Drone Girl's open cuts. She hadn't realized how bad her face had been injured. No wonder the guys out front looked like she'd just been through a prolonged bout of domestic violence. The gal finished cleaning up her face, neck, and ears. Anything else? How's those ribs, darling? Drone Girl had been wearing a pretty heavy flannel to keep herself comfortable. She gently pressed her fingers against her ribs. Ah, well, they feel bruised maybe, but not broken. What about your fingers and toes? Drone Girl wiggled her toes, and everything seemed to be fine. She looked down at her hands, though, and they were thrashed with defensive wounds.